Coming up, I'm speaking with Susan Kimberly, former Deputy Mayor. That's next on the St. Paul Forum. Welcome to the St. Paul Forum. Today I'm speaking with former Deputy Mayor Susan Kimberly. Thank you for joining us, Susan.
Oh, what a pleasure to be here.
We are so happy to talk with you today about economic development and your experience in politics in the city of St. Paul over time and in creating a great space for business. So speaking of space for business, you are recently retired as interim executive director for the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
Congratulations.
It's great to be retired. I recommend it highly.
I bet it's been a long time coming, right?
It's been a while.
So how did you enjoy your role at the Chamber?
It was a great opportunity, and it was not an opportunity that one would have predicted when I started my career in St. Paul. So it was a wonderful opportunity to run an organization with a great tradition and a long history in St. Paul. The city and the Chamber are almost the same age in St. Paul. So it was a tremendous opportunity, and it was a real pleasure to do that. And it was also a pleasure to have Matt Kramer come in and let me retire.
So we should be thanking Matt.
Matt,
yes.
Thanks, Matt.
So you mentioned that it's being the chamber exec, even interim, was different from where you started. Tell us a little bit about how you started out.
Well, my first visible job in St. Paul was I was elected to the city council in 1974, and I was reelected in 1976, and I was considered really too liberal at the time. So it was not predictable that I would have wound up being
no kidding.
CEO of the chamber.
Oh, sure. What ward did you serve?
We didn't have wards then.
Really?
I was elected citywide. We had 7 citywide council members. The wards came in about 4 years after I left.
No kidding. And why did that happen? Why were the wards established?
Well, I think. Well, let me just take a step back and take the big, broad view. When I was elected, we had 7 at-large city council members, and we had a brand-new charter that made the mayor a strong chief executive. You know, the mayor of St. Paul is really a mayor. He has real executive authority. So in the American model, if you will, if you go to James Madison, Thomas Jefferson's model, we had an executive, a vibrant, robust executive like the president, and we essentially had an upper house like the Senate. We didn't have a lower house.
Oh.
So we created the district councils. And I was the author of the resolution that created the district councils in 1975. And that essentially allowed us to have a lower house. Well, the voters really wanted to have their own guy, their own gal. They really wanted to have their own person. So 4 years later, they had an opportunity to get a ward system, and they took it. So one of the things that impacts economic development in St. Paul, in my view, is that we still have a robust chief executive, but we have 2 lower houses and no upper house.
Right. Oh.
So it's kind of an accident that we wound up with both wards and district councils. Interesting.
So actually, I'm interested. What do you think the role? What's the missing role then, or of the upper house, where that might be a potential problem, or where it's a benefit?
When I was on the city council, the really influential organizations were the League of Women Voters, the Democratic Party, Organized Labor, and the Chamber of Commerce. That's who mattered. That's who you listened to when you had to make up your mind. Neighborhoods, you didn't have to get too involved, because if you made somebody unhappy here, you just went over here and made some other people happy. So there was a real need to have that neighborhood district connection. But now we have both, and so we don't have a city council that really takes a broad citywide view. They take they take a view for their own ward, and then with legislative courtesy, where if I represent this ward, everybody says, oh, if that's what she wants, then that's what we'll do.
Sure.
They don't vote by themselves anymore. We used to disagree and have 4-3 votes. That just doesn't happen anymore.
No kidding.
So it's very different.
Yeah. Have we lost something?
I think so. I think we've made it more difficult to do economic development. We made it more difficult to do business. We've made it more difficult to develop real estate. And because we've made it more difficult, other places that are less difficult get the investment and we don't.
And we've made it more difficult because the economic developers need to go through now to lower levels.
Well, right now, I mean, it's hardly exaggeration. Everybody gets to vote on every tree, every shrub. And, you know, it just can't take that long.
Sure.
It can't be that complicated.
Interesting.
You need to have a set of rules. You need to follow the rules. Now, the other thing that's happened as a result of that is that when I was on the city council, it was clear that the staff worked for the mayor. And I was, as a city council president, I supported that. I wanted that chief executive office to be strong.
Sure.
So that was clear. And the process was that the administration made a professional recommendation. The staff always made a recommendation in accordance with existing policy and law. You didn't have to follow it, you know, and we didn't. We often did. We were just as political as anybody else was in those days. But we at least had to sit through a professional recommendation. And the public, it wasn't as easy. We didn't have cable television then, so the public could follow it, but you had to actually sit there and go through it. So we've lost some very important steps in the process since we went to wards with district councils. So
you actually had a role at PED then on the other side.
I went to work in 1997. I was hired by Pam Wheelock, who was then PED director for Norm Coleman, and I was a team leader in her newly reorganized PED. And quite frankly, when I got there, I was shocked to find out that members of the council thought they got to pick developers. I said, that's a staff decision. So,
okay.
So I'm sure I upset a couple of city council members by saying, no, you don't.
Interesting, okay.
But they really do.
So picking developers.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It used to be that if there was a city-owned parcel, or if there was a proposed development the city had a major piece of participation in, there'd be an RFP process. People would put together proposals. They'd put together teams, and they'd compete with one another to come up with the best idea. That's pretty much gone. Not entirely, but it's pretty much gone. And people just sort of, well, I think there's a tendency to hire their friends.
Oh, interesting. So walk us through that process a little bit, today's process, please.
I think instead of having an RFP process, or instead of having an open competition, there's a tendency for the lobbying to go on with the district council and with the council person in that particular area, and they decide who's going to get it.
Oh,
and there's less competition.
Sure.
I think we miss something in that approach.
But the approach is that the RFP is still sent out when there's a piece of land to be developed?
There are certain conditions where RFPs are still used, but they're very rare.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Huh. So that's maybe potentially unfortunate. For some people, that's probably fortunate.
You will probably hear from some city council members who think it's just perfect.
Yes. What else happened at PED while you were there that you were surprised about?
That was the big surprise. When I went from PED, I became deputy mayor. I went to work for Senator Norm Coleman, and I came back and I was Randy Kelly's PED director. And in that capacity, I had the privilege of sort of bringing to fruition Housing 5,000, where Randy Kelly had actually said, we're going to build 5,000 houses in 4 years, and PED had charted out the schedule, and they'd actually figured out the pathway to get to the goal.
Yeah, I remember
and we made
that.
the goal, and there was a percentage of affordable housing mixed in with all of those units. I think that was, in my opinion, that was the best piece of work that PED has ever done.
Wow.
Under any of the different organizational processes. It was a wonderful piece of work.
Because you were all focused on one big outcome.
There was a goal, there were benchmarks, there were ways of measuring success, and we made it. It was a great piece of work.
Where do you think the city needs to go as far as housing now?
We had, when I was at the chamber, we had an executive committee meeting with one of the developers that is trying to build a project in St. Paul, and that developer said that the housing comeback is at least 3 to 5 years away. And so right now there isn't much housing that's going to get done, and it's sad, but there isn't much that's going to happen, and there isn't much of any way to make it happen.
Sure.
We just have to get through this.
Does it need to happen if the market is that poor and we have vacant homes and vacant lofts?
Well, I have actually read all 700 pages of The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. I did that in 2006.
Wow.
And I love that book, and I love Adam Smith's philosophy, and I think he best describes how the market works. And he would say, well, just be patient.
Sure.
And that's hard for a politician to do because we now expect that politicians are responsible for everything, most of which they're not responsible for. And there's not much for them to do. And so the truth of the matter is we aren't going to accelerate this recovery much by doing anything.
What about all of these, the new developments that are coming in, like the Penfield, and those, there was an announcement of several housing developments.
I'm speaking, this is only my own opinion. It's nobody else's, okay? I think the Penfield crosses the line. The proposal is for the city to actually own and operate a private business. I think that's across the line. I don't think we should do that at all. And there's some real risk in trying to make that happen. So I'm not high on that project with that structure.
Well, and to that point, isn't Lawson now owned, the Lawson building, now owned or managed by the city, or at some point wasn't it?
The ramp is owned by the city.
Okay.
The building wasn't owned by the city, but it was, the city essentially guaranteed the financing.
Sure.
And, in my opinion, that was across the line, too.
Interesting. And did that happen while you were at PED? Or?
No, that was before I got there, thank goodness.
You're not to blame for that. Which you were talking about, you were a team leader. Which area? I did
the Southwest. It was sort of like being the team leader of Paradise. I had Highland Park, I had Crocus Hill, I had Summit University too, but it was sort of like all the good neighborhoods.
Sure.
And then after doing that for about a year, I became the downtown team leader and had a few more challenges.
Yeah, oh my gosh. So were you, well, you were only there for a year with the Grand Avenue and Highland and whatnot.
Yeah.
But tell us a little bit about the development there, because there was sort of an overlay, wasn't there, or some guidelines?
That came later.
Oh, okay.
When I was doing the Southwest team, the big project was the Mississippi Market, and Pam Wheelock insisted that it be at least 2 stories high. Now, I have a sketch at home in my house. I'm really a terrible wonk of the Mississippi Market that was 3 stories high, and the one we should have built, but we did get the 2-story Mississippi Market done. Not without a lot of agony, but we did get it done. And it does anchor that corner, I think, in a much better way than any single-story building would have. But that was my big project as Southwest team leader, and it's turned out pretty well, but it's had its moments. The overlay was when I was PED director, and I won't name this person, but one of the senior planners at PED described the overlay as a 35-page suicide note for a neighborhood. It essentially takes the private marketplace out of play along Grand Avenue. And it's going to be very difficult to expand anything on Grand Avenue. And it's an attempt in many ways to freeze things as they are. The marketplace is a little like Mother Nature. You know, you really can't fool the marketplace. And I don't think we're going to wind up with anything really positive as a result of that.
Interesting.
Change is part of life, and if you put together a model where change can't happen, it goes backwards. It just doesn't sit still.
That's a very good point. We're talking right now with Susan Kimberly, former Deputy Mayor of the City of St. Paul. So now talk about downtown. When you took over that, what were the challenges?
You know, I think the challenge in downtown St. Paul has been the same challenge that was here in 1974 when I got here. So, as far as downtown is concerned, I haven't had a lot of success. No, it isn't that there's no people and no business. There is, there are a fair number of people, and there's a number of businesses, and there's some really important employers like Ecolab and Travelers and Securia, and there's some very important things going on downtown. But we've had this chronic shortage of office tenants. We've had very high vacancy rates with a little bit of the George Latimer era when we got them under 10%, but they've been high, 15, 25% for just about forever. And that, I think, is the real challenge for our community on the economic development level to address. And that isn't just a matter of the government figuring it out. In fact, the government doesn't have much to do about it. It's really a matter of the community trying to figure out how is it going to market itself, who is it going to market itself to, what kind of competitive deals, not that the government's going to subsidize everything, I think that's a blind alley, but what kind of competitive deals can be made that will attract people who, when they have the opportunity to be in downtown, can be. Downtown has some really great assets, really great positive attributes. Rice Park in Lower Town, fabulous. And if you watch them with very little government help, they're blossoming. They've come into their own. I remember when Chris Matthews was sitting on Rice Park doing his show on MSNBC, and he says, "I want you to take a look at this." And they showed the landmarks in there, and they said, "This is the most beautiful place in America." And I said, "Oh my God, he just said we were the most beautiful place in America." And I think we kind of get used to the fact that is an extraordinary place. And so that area, Lower Town, that's tremendous. It's this gap in between that we have to get more offices filled so we got more people, more vitality in our downtown. And that's not something that the government can do.
Right.
That the whole community has to dig in and get that done.
And you're talking about relatively, I think, relatively small office spaces, right? It's not another Lawson to get in there.
No, the perfect building in today's marketplace is a large floor plate, 40 to 60,000 square feet, which is the Lawson building. And so that's the most competitive space. Well, with the vacancy rates we have, we're not going to build another Lawson building in a long time until we fill up the vacancies that we have. So I don't think it's a matter of finding that kind of tenant. What we're looking for is what's the hip, high-tech, low-tech company that wants to move out of its strip mall into downtown. They want to go downtown. And who fits in St. Paul's scheme of things. St. Paul and Minneapolis in terms of downtowns are very different. It's not that Minneapolis is better. It's certainly bigger. But St. Paul really does have a tremendous case to sell. And it's a matter of how do you find the people who want to be here. And I think I think that's the biggest challenge we have as a community.
And whose role is that? So you talk about the Capital City Partnership, which seems to focus mostly on big corporations. The St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce is small business, but have they even thought about how to attract in more small businesses into downtown? Is it PED? Who has that responsibility?
Well, the front line is the owner of the buildings. I mean, they have the greatest stake in filling up the buildings. They also know what they have, and they know what their economics are, and they know what kind of deals they can cut. That's who has to lead. And there also needs to be, I think, sort of an agreement in downtown that we're going to stop fighting with each other over every little thing, and that we're going to agree on a plan and a strategy where it isn't just Capital City Partnership or the Chamber, it's everybody. And we've agreed on what we're going to do. And again, it isn't that, I don't really think it's the government that's going to be successful in that. God knows every mayor I've ever worked with has tried like heck to make things change. It's a community-wide effort, and I think if we were successful, the angel choir would open up and start to sing.
Rainbows and birds and butterflies would be flying around all the time. So there was a bit of an effort to attract businesses, small businesses, into downtown during the RNC.
Yes.
And that didn't seem to be that effective.
Actually, it was quite successful.
Was it?
Yeah. The Chamber worked very, very diligently with Capital City Partnership and PED and the Mayor's Office and everybody else. We got 21 or 2 businesses to come in just temporarily. At least half of them stayed.
No kidding.
The other thing that was a result of that is that in many of the little byways of the Skyway system, including the great big place that's now the International Market, you know, we don't have Taylor's and Saks Fifth Avenue, but we've got activity in many more places now. And activity is where you start. Excuse me.
No, go ahead. So that was successful. If that was successful, what's the next step? Is that a best practice now?
Well, hopefully, whatever we're calling NUCO.
What is
which
it?
is the code name is NUCO. And it's going to take over the roles of the Capital City Partnership in Economic Development. What I think that organization has to do is pull people together and figure out what the plan is, what the message is, and what we're going to do as a group. And we have to define what we agree on, so we can just set aside those things we don't agree on. And if we disagree, we won't do that one. We'll do only the ones we agree on and that we think will work. It's got to have a long-range view, and it's got to have a lot of participation in pulling it together. It'll be very, very painful and difficult. But other communities have done it and have had success. I don't think there's any other way.
There's some sacrifice involved for all parties, do you think?
Well, I think there's probably more reward than sacrifice, but we have a hard time getting together and agreeing. That's one of the things that we don't do very well, in my opinion.
We, as in?
As a community. If you look at
residents and...
If you look at businesses downtown, small, medium, and large, the residents, the government, the Chamber, the Capital City Partnership, BOMA, it's a very big family, and it has more than a few feuds going on. And we got to sort of literally come together and figure out what we can do on a consensus kind of model that's going to move this thing forward. Now, light rail, hopefully, will be a net contributor. It's going to cause a lot of disruption in the next 2 years. Maybe that can be the catalyst.
Isn't that the role that former Mayor Norm Coleman, or now former Senator, played? I'm
terribly, terribly biased. I mean, Norm Coleman gave me my career back. I'm deeply grateful for what he did for me, and I'm really I think he did the best job of being a visionary leader of any of the mayors I've worked with. And that might make George Latimer cringe, but they had very different styles.
Yeah.
But they both accomplished a lot. But Norm did sort of get people to align with his vision. And that's one way to do it. That's a little top-down. I think ideally you got to sort of have top-down and bottom-up and come together. But, you know, if we could have another charismatic mayor, that wouldn't hurt.
Sure.
But what we've got right now is we've got the right model in this NUCO. It's now a matter of actually pulling the people together and doing the hard work.
Will you have a hand in that?
I don't think so.
You're retired.
I'm retired.
Well, I think that would be unfortunate that the folks couldn't benefit from your broad experience and the different view, you know, the different opportunities you had to see how all of this has been done through different lenses.
It would be.
Don't you think?
It would be fun. And if they do it both this top-down and bottom-up fashion, then I can come to the meetings and put in my 2 cents worth. I could be one of the participants.
There you go. So in some of what you've talked about, I do sense a little bit of a slightly more conservative bent than liberal. Where does the liberal thought come in? Where does the liberal view come in to that?
I ran for the county board in 1994. Sue Haig beat me. It was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, and probably the best thing that ever happened to Sue Haig. You know, so I think it really turned out well for both of us. But I lost by 16%, and that's a blow to the ego. And when I started looking at the whole thing, I decided that I had been too liberal. Now, that's all right. If you really believe that, then you should just be a good liberal. But that sort of made me think about the whole business, and I picked up again a book by Peter Drucker called The New Realities. And I read that, and I'd read it before, and it'd been interesting, but I read it again, and I said, oh, he's talking to me. And what I realized was I've always had both this conservative and liberal strain, and I'd sort of wiped out the conservative side. And what I realized first was, well, I'm not really a Democrat anymore.
No kidding.
Now, after making that decision in 1995, it was 4 more years before I decided I was a Republican. In between there, I did a lot of thinking and reading and sorting things out. But yeah, I'm a fairly conservative person now.
Okay, so you killed the liberal in you.
No, I wouldn't say I killed it, but I got it under control.
What in the world would have sent you off the liberal side, if you will?
I'm sure if I had won, I'd be liberal.
Oh, I see.
You know, I didn't have that reason to stop and think.
It's sort of market demand, right? The demand was there for the Republicans.
That's right.
Okay.
You know. But no, I mean, I thought I was on the right track, and then I had, oh my goodness.
Not the right track. Interesting.
Not really.
Okay. Well, we are almost done. I have one last question.
Okay.
What are you going to do now that you're retired?
I am writing a book. I'm working on my golf swing, playing a lot of golf. And I'm going to go to Paris in the spring. And I'm going to be a really good retired person.
Oh, that's fabulous. Well, we will look out for your book. Can you give us just a little?
Well, the book is, the working title is The Third Incident. And it is about the period of time when I changed genders. It's about a period of time when I was living as 2 people and I had to choose who I was going to be. And then I had to, when I got done with that, the surprise was I had to reintegrate the other person into who had become.
Interesting.
So it's that period of transition. And the third incident refers to a theory of developmental psychology that 3 incidents in your life shape your personality forever. And the character, who is me, can't find her third incident.
So is it fiction, some sort of?
It's a mixture of fact and fiction.
Okay. Wow, I'll be looking out for that then. Thank you so much. Good luck with being retired. I hope we see you again.
I really enjoyed it. Anytime.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on the St. Paul Forum.